All right, Colleen, welcome to the Reframe podcast. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You're going to make my job easy today because you have way cooler stories than I do.
So.
That is Colleen Smith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Josh Smith, no relation. I had people ask me that when I worked at the same church as you. Like, I don't know if you got that, but I was like, oh, is she like your sister? Like, no, we actually don't know each other at all. So, I want to get to some of your stories. You would classify yourself as a missionary, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. But you are a church staffer.
Yes.
I like the pause. Yeah, so I've told you a little bit about this, but Reframed is just about reframing ministry, like how we look at it. I don't know how you grew up in the Midwest, but I grew up with, there's a very classic model. It's the pastor, the associate pastor. Basically, you're a pastor or you're on staff at a church, and that's how ministry gets done. Or you're a missionary in a foreign country. Very few options. And I just don't see that in the Bible. I see that as well as you can be anything and live like Jesus and have a ministry, which I know we agree on that part.
Yes.
So
yes.
Here's the thing. I worked Colleen adjacent in the church. So I wasn't directly involved with what you were doing, but I heard the stories, and I don't mean to build this up too much or make you nervous, but you are one of my heroes of the faith. When people are giving me stories about what it means to live on faith, what it means to just be radical, my mind goes to you instantly. Me and my wife, we talk about you on a regular basis. And so I just want to start at the beginning because all the things I don't know is what I want to learn. I think everybody would like to hear it. Give me Colleen growing up. Kansas?
Yeah. So I grew up in Kansas. I did not grow up. I had no idea what a church staff looked like because I didn't really grow up in a church. I grew up in an extremely broken home. I was born to two parents who were married because basically my grandfather did not like my father. So my mom married him out of spite. And my dad was a drug addict. He was abusive in every possible way, physically, emotionally, verbally, sexually, all of that. In and out of jail. My mom left when I was 11-ish. With my grandparents. So I was raised by my grandparents, had to grow up really, really fast. As a teenager, really began to rebel and use the things that my dad had done as like my way of getting through life. So very, very promiscuous lifestyle, very much broken. Didn't really have a plan for my life other than I knew I wanted to go to Kansas University and be a sports writer. So I left for college, went to 2-year college, did very well, left, went to school, and then woke up one day and was like, oh man, my life is a mess. I was failing out of classes. I was bartending. I was sleeping with a man for money to pay my bills. I was partying every single night. And that is not the life that I wanted for myself. And so I decided one day that I needed to get out. So there were two options. One, meet someone on the internet and get married, which was probably not the best plan, or become a nanny. And so I just began to apply for nanny jobs. I interviewed for 3, happened to interview with a family in Maryland, fell in love with them, was 100% sure they weren't going to call me back. But literally, we hung the phone up and they were like, can you be here on Tuesday? That was in 2 days.
Wow.
And I was like, oh man, I need to quit my job, tell my grandmother that I'm leaving across the country by myself and pack my stuff. But I did. I came here with a plan and a suitcase, one suitcase, which now I could not move with one suitcase. And the plan was to be here for 1 year and go home, and that everything would be good. I don't know what I was thinking, but what I was thinking was that 1 year was going to buy me time to figure my life out. So the plot twist is that I moved in with a Jewish family. Who obviously weren't going to introduce me to Christ. But what they did do is tell me that when I got here, I needed to have some sort of faith and it couldn't be Judaism. So they took me to the first church they could find, which was 5 minutes from their house, and dropped me off the first Sunday I was here.
Wow.
And it was rough because I didn't have a church background. I didn't know how to act in church. I didn't know anyone. But what I did know was that they were going to help me make my life better. And if this was one of the steps, I needed to follow it. And so I went to this church for a few weeks, and thank you, Jesus. He put a youth pastor in my neighborhood who would chase me down the jogging path and invite me to his youth group. And I would get so frustrated because I was like, I'm 21. I don't need to go to youth group. But looking back, we're very good friends now. And I tell him, I'm like, I see now that you are building a community for me because I wouldn't know how to do it. And so I would go to this youth group on Tuesdays and a Bible study on Thursdays, and occasionally, if I wasn't hungover, church on Sundays. I'm being very honest with you about my life.
No, that's what we want to hear.
And I would so I would go to church on Sunday if I wasn't hungover. Well, all this time passed and I was going to youth group. And then he says to me one day, I want you to come on the youth retreat in the spring. And I looked at him like he had two heads. And I was like, I don't think you know how I live my life. One, who wants to give up a weekend to go to some church camp? And two, I don't think I'm the kind of girl you want volunteering on your youth retreat. And he just like relentlessly pursued me. And that point in my life, I was very much a people pleaser to men. And so if that was going to make a man happy and I was going to get some sort of like affirmation from that, I was going to do it. So finally I just said yes. And at 22 years old on a youth retreat, I accepted Christ.
Wow.
Yeah. I wish I could tell you it was rainbows and butterflies and my life changed, but it was like 8 years really of a battle of, if my physical dad didn't love me, how can this heavenly Father who I'm not able to tangibly touch and see and feel love me? And so there was a lot of rebellion in that, a lot of even being like knee deep in ministry and still like fighting like with the sin that I was living in. And I actually just a few weeks ago was speaking in front of an audience and I said, I've never said this out loud before, but at 30 years old was the first time I ever had true Christian accountability. And a friend sat me down and she was like, you're a fraud. And I was like, what? And she was like, you're doing ministry and you're telling these kids like not to go sleep with their boyfriends, but you're leaving on Friday night and you're sleeping with whatever man will give you attention. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's right. And like my world crashed and I was heartbroken because I'm like, this is what I want for my life, but I don't know how to live it. And so she sent me away to her condo at the beach, but failed to tell me that there was no internet or TV or anything really. And so for 2 weeks, I literally spent time with Christ and I came back changed, like really, like I need to begin a weight loss journey because food had become my addiction. I needed to stop drinking. I needed to get rid of unhealthy people in my life. And I took a vow of purity and everything began to change, including my heart for ministry. Like I didn't just want to be this girl that drove into a neighborhood anymore. I wanted to be a girl who lived like intentionally in a neighborhood. So that's how I got to where I am now. Yeah. I was doing ministry in West Baltimore, like really, really had planned my life there. Which is where I met my current pastor. He found my blog and really just called me and said, I'm coming back to plant a church and I really want to invest in someone like you who's really doing the hard work. But I don't want to be in the middle of it doing the hard work, really, is what he was saying. But he came and visited me and we began this friendship. And so he kind of walked through some of the hardest ministry like things in my life where God was really taking away my ministry that I had, the ministry that he had built with me in it. And I called him and I was just like, here's my heart. Like, I really want to live intentionally. I really want to be a part of the neighborhood I'm serving. I don't want to be viewed in a mostly African-American culture as a white savior. Yeah. Like, I want to be viewed as a neighbor and a friend and someone who really does life with you. And so the doors began to close in West Baltimore and I began to really question like what my next steps were. And so he said to me, come see me at this building. And so not really knowing him, I was like, coming to an empty building in East Baltimore to meet you, but I'm coming. And that day he had said to me, you know, we really want someone to live in the neighborhood. We really want to have like things happening here. And at that point I had decided to take 3 months off and just really pray about God's direction. It would have been very easy that day to say I'm moving in tomorrow, but I didn't. I took those 3 months, which were probably some of the hardest 3 months of my life because you know me, but no one else does. I love to hang out with prostitutes, homeless people, drug addicts, and inner city kids. And telling God that I wouldn't do that for 3 months was heartbreaking and very, very, very hard. And so I did, though. And I went a few times and sat on the porch of the house that I live in now. And I just began to pray. And I was like, God, I need you to make it clear that this is the next step for me. And he used a little boy who's now probably 15 to say to me one day, "You're white. What are you doing here? Why are you sitting on this porch?" And for me to say, "I'm moving in," and him to tell me no, that was a terrible idea. And that if I moved in, that the neighborhood would think I was an undercover police officer. No one would talk to me. Like, it was like very, very much discouraging, but also encouraging. And I began to ask him, "Where do you see white people in your life?" And he began to say, like, the police officer who arrests my brother, my teacher, my doctor, no one who was like an equal to him. It was all powerful people. And that day, God really was like, this is it. Like, this is where you're going to come. And so a week later, I moved in. And let me tell you, he was not lying. They treated me like I was a plague. Like I literally was an undercover police officer.
Yeah.
They would barely talk to me. We began a Bible study on Wednesday night for the kids in the neighborhood, and like 5 or 6 of them would come, but they were very skittish, very like, "Who are you?" And it did not help that at the time my entire volunteer team was white. And so all of these white people coming in, and they're like, "No, you're undercover police officers." Well, I tell them that a few months after I moved in, I earned my street cred because the police raided my house in the middle of the night. Because
That's a fun way to wake up.
Yeah. Literally over my bed, there was a police officer with a gun drawn, and he was like, "Ma'am, you need to get up." And I thought it was a dream.
Yeah.
So I rolled over, and he was like, no, this is real. And I was like, okay. And of course, my pastor's on vacation in Lynchburg, Virginia, and I'm calling him at 4:30 in the morning, and he's like, "What do you want me to do?" I don't know. What am I supposed to do? But that was the day that I earned my street cred, and that was the day that everything changed for me. And
Really?
Kids began to come to gym or to kids club, and kids began to use my house as their safe haven and their community center. And their parents began to come and ask questions. And so literally, like, everything changed. Now they tell me that when I get homesick and listen to country music, I lose a little of my street cred, but I'm okay with it.
There's so much. I want to dive a little deeper into some of that. So I'm interested. You move here. Let's just start with this. You move here, you nanny for a Jewish family. They basically demand that you have a faith, but it can't be Judaism. What in the world? Like, that seems so odd to me. Was it odd to you, or were you just like, whatever?
Oh, no, it was odd. It was very odd. Like, I knew that they would want me to have faith because they were very much ingrained in their Jewish culture. But I didn't quite understand, like, why they wouldn't want me to be Jewish.
Yeah.
But apparently, the Jewish culture, when you're, like, really into the Jewish culture and you're really a part of it, they don't really like you to convert into their religion.
Okay.
They're not even super excited about it if you marry into it.
I think I've heard that now that you're saying that. Okay.
Yeah. And so for me, like, I mean, they didn't care. It could have been anything. Like, but it just happened that they found a church, and that's where they took me. And I think back sometimes, I'm like, what if they took me to a mosque or a Hindu
Whatever was
temple
closest,
or whatever? Yeah. Where would I be now? But I think it was that God, like, just so strategically placed other people in my life that kind of drew me to that.
And what, like, for them, do you think it was just like a value placed on faith in general?
I don't really know. What I do know, though, is that for me, the cultural experience of living in a Jewish home and, like, really getting to know who I was as a Christian was a great thing. And to be able to sit with them and, like, talk through the Torah and, like, the Bible and the New Testament. And even now, like, I still have a relationship with their kids.
Oh, cool.
We'll talk, like, through some stuff. And yeah.
It's a lot of crazy turning points. That's obviously one. When you decided that what were our options again? You were going to be a nanny or
get married. Find someone on the internet and get married.
Why those two things?
I don't know. I think it was that I grew up in a very sheltered home.
Okay.
Like a very protected, like once my parents left, like a very protected home of like, and I wanted to be a writer since I was 7 years old. And so that was my dream. And that's what my grandparents pushed me to. But there wasn't like a whole lot of other like things that I had. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I could go travel, or, oh, I could just pick up my stuff and move. It was that I had to have a plan and a purpose for moving.
Okay.
And so, and my friend in my junior college had become a nanny. And so to see her be able to leave so easily, and I think for me, it was like I needed to go.
So
and
it was a ticket
needed
out.
to be,
It was a ticket out.
It needed to be something fast.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That is amazing. You talked about you like to hang out with prostitutes and people on the street. Like, I hear that. And like, I can imagine someone watching or listening to this and the eyebrows are raised, but like, that's exactly what Jesus did. You know, that was his MO. And I'm sure you have countless stories, and I do want to get into those, but I want to go back to the kid on the street, like telling you can't move there, basically. Was there some of that? Was any of that a challenge, or was it all just peace and confirmation that this is where I have to be?
I think there was some challenge and maybe even some fear that the enemy tried to place in me.
Yeah.
And to move into a home by myself as a single white girl in a mostly African American community. And even like the day that I moved in, the lady down the street was like, I'm just letting you know, these hood boys are going to be after you. You're a novelty. Don't let them in your house. You know, like it was just very much a like, there was a little bit of fear, but there was also like peace of like, this is what I've called you to, and I'm going to protect you. And I live my life every day knowing that God's protection is around me. I mean, I don't live in Beverly Hills. I live in a very, very, very hard, dark place. And knowing that when I walk out of my house every day, God's protection is around me is peace. Like, and even to know that like, as I walk through my neighborhood, like I've built a respect there and they know me and they care about me. And I am like one of them. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. I've told you you're a legend of faith to me, and I mean that. And that was one of my questions is like, how do you deal with the fear? But I think you just answered that, and it's so encouraging to me. But I think maybe I unfairly assume that you never deal with that. You know what I mean? I look at you as a person who's beyond that. Are there still times when the fear creeps in, or the uncertainty, or?
This question is coming at the perfect time. This summer has been very, very difficult. And there have been days where I've woke up and I've been like, okay, I don't know if I can do this anymore. This summer alone, I've buried a lot of my students. I've sat at the hospital where like one of my most favorite kids was shot, and like we weren't sure like even if he was going to live or if he was even alive. And so there is like maybe not fear, but just like uncertainty of like, am I really making a difference here if I'm sitting in Johns Hopkins at 2 a.m. because one of my favorite kids was just shot? Like, and like really questioning like, what is God doing here? But then those are combated with things like sending a kid to college and watching a kid get into their favorite high school and watching a kid like get excited about finally having a 40-hour-a-week job. Like, you know, things that like aren't happening for these kids without what's happening at GEM.
Absolutely. Because you were, like you said, you're there, you're part of the community, you're diving deep. And so, I mean, it's a package deal, right? Like you get the tough with the wonderful. And just to kind of, let's paint a little bit of a picture of the neighborhood. I have been there. I've done a few church services there, but I don't think people quite grasp. Like, I remember we brought a mission team in one time when I was there, and remember the guy wanted to go for a jog, and everyone's like, that's a bad idea. And he got shot. I mean, he lived. It wasn't a life-threatening injury, and I think it was even a stray bullet, but I don't think people grasp it's the real deal down there. Like, you're not, this isn't a TV set. Like, there's a lot of hurt. So, all right, let's go the opposite side. Let's get away from the fear. Give me some of your triumphs. Who are the kids or the prostitutes or the people that you look back and you're like, oh, Jesus, thank you that I was a part of that?
Wow, there's so many. But even like just in the summer, like on Saturday, one of my students went to college. She actually left for college, like didn't go to a community college in the city, which is very much what's poured into the kids is like, this is what's good for you and this is the best you're going to get. But for her, it was like, no, I want to go to school like away from my neighborhood. I want to play a college sport. I want to be a college athlete. And it's interesting. She has quite a transformation. I met her when she was 9. And she walked into the church and cussed me up one side and down the other for no reason at all. I mean, she just was having a bad day, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was her MO. Like, she was just a very mean and nasty child. And I was like, no, these are the kids that I love. These are the kids that are hard and the ones that are going to challenge me. But those are the ones that I'm going to pursue the hardest. And so I built a relationship not just with her, but with her mom and her dad and her brother and her family. And so I've walked through a lot of things with them. And so to watch her flourish into this high school student who in 9th grade was like, I want to be a public defender. I want to be a lawyer, but failing out of her classes, and me sitting her down one day and saying, look, here's the deal. You can't be a public defender when you're getting all Fs. So either you're going to have to give up that dream, which I would never tell you to do, or something's going to have to change. And so she started playing sports. And when you play a sport, you have to have decent grades. And so her GPA just started to rise and to rise and to rise. And not only is she in college, but she's in college on a scholarship, like a freshman scholarship. She had a state of Maryland grant that was given to her to cover her first year of college. And she's thriving. Like, she's only been there since Saturday, but I've FaceTimed her every single day. And it's just so exciting to watch her. And not just watch her at college, but watch her be who she is outside of what she was told that she was going to be. Because a lot of these kids, they grow up, they're born into these families of generational poverty and drug dealing and murder. And that's what they're told they're going to be. And that's what they believe about themselves. And so to watch her be able to remove herself from that on her own, she did that. We walked alongside her, but she made those decisions. So that's a huge one. And then I just got back from Texas, and I guess it was in last fall, one of my students, he went to college. He really did give it a shot, but he realized that maybe that really wasn't for him. And so he decided to join the military, which was bittersweet because he was leaving. And I always get sad when they leave, but I'm also very excited when they leave. And so he went to Georgia, went to Florida, and is now stationed in Texas. And so I got to spend time with him and stand next to him in Texas and be like, do you realize how huge this is? You're in another state, living your best life, and really thriving and have goals and dreams and aspirations that you might not have had 5 years ago. And so to see that, and then one of my kids this week is another one that he's graduated high school. He has huge, huge, huge dreams, but college isn't really for him. And I've realized that college isn't for all of them. And I want them to know that college is ingrained in your brain when you're in high school, but that's not always the best option. And so he just got a job, a 40-hour-a-week valeting cars, which is the best job for him. And so to see him get excited about that and to know that maybe this isn't his career, but this is what's going to help him be able to live his dreams. And he's writing a book right now. And so to walk alongside him writing a book about his life as a kid growing up in the hood. And there's just so many. Josh, I could tell you stories for hours.
Listen, we got the time. That's all I'm looking for, because I believe that stories create motivation. They drive people. They create space for ministry. Because when I tell people what I know about you and what you do and the choices you've made, it's always the reaction of how can anyone do that? And that's what I want them to know. If God calls you to it, you just have to take the first step. You just got to step in one step at a time, you know. But I think when people hear these stories of victory, they go, okay, it comes with a deal. You have some losses, you have some hard times, but the fact that you were in Texas with a student, you're diving deep. You're not just helping them. You're not just pushing them out and away. You're still part of their lives. That's Jesus level ministry to me.
I tell them, you're stuck with this white lady forever.
Oh man.
I will be your biggest cheerleader. And I've been to high school graduations where I literally am the only white person. And I'm you will hear me screaming the loudest. And you will know that it is me.
Yeah. You're do you know Shane Claiborne? Does that name ring a bell? That's what you're doing. He's doing it in Philly. You're doing it here. I don't know if he still is, but and what I really believe, Captivate Church is a phenomenal church. They've changed a ton of lives. But maybe the biggest thing they've done is the ministry that's happening in the city, because you're turning lives around. You're bringing other people in. You're building a team. You're just constantly changing the neighborhood, one kid at a time. Will it be completely different 10 years from now? I don't know, but you've probably lost count of the kids that are probably alive now, because you just said, okay, God, I'll do that. I'll go there.
Yeah.
That's awesome. has there ever been a time where you struggled with, like, have you ever felt like maybe God's calling me somewhere else? Not I'm scared and I want to leave, but have you ever wrestled with that? I've had that tension in my life with different ministries, and it's hard to leave any ministry.
Yeah.
Have you ever fought with that?
I haven't fought with that, but I do have a dream for another ministry that would remove me from East Baltimore, which I think will be my retirement plan. But I have always said, even now in the hardest parts, I've had friends say to me, like, don't you think it's time to go? Don't you think it's time to go? And I'm like, God will make it very clear when it's time to go. And I have woke up some days and been like, okay, God, like, send me to a farm today. Like, I'm done. But I know that after 3 hours of being in a farm, I would not be happy. God has to give me a real peace about this.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that I can honestly say that I've wrestled with that necessarily, but I have wrestled with, like, will I hear God's voice when it is time? Because I'm so invested here.
Yeah.
And the kids have this fear of, like, someday, because I'm a single woman, and they have this fear of someday I'm going to get married and run away. But I'm like, no, the person that I marry has to know that, like, this isn't, someone said to me a few weeks ago, I don't know how you do your job. Well, it's not a job, it's a calling.
Yeah.
Like, God has called me here. I can't just wake up tomorrow and be like, oh yeah, I think I'll quit my job today.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of prayer that has to go into that, and a lot of peace, and a lot of, like, knowing that, one, either my job there is done, or someone else God's building up to take what he's given me, the gift he's given me, and allowing them to continue. That's
an interesting thought. So, like, I hear you saying you wouldn't feel peace about moving on unless someone else was carrying that torch.
Or God clearly made it clear that the work that was supposed to be done there has been done.
Yeah.
But I think my ultimate dream is that some of these kids that we're building up would become the leaders, and they would be gym directors, and they would be pastors in East Baltimore, and they would change their neighborhood.
Yeah. Which totally mirrors what Captivate Global is doing. It's not just, like you said, it's not a white savior. It's like, how do we give them the means to do it?
Yeah.
Like, let them take over, which I think is absolutely phenomenal. Where do you still have the blog?
I do.
What's the best way for people to keep up with you?
On social media, like, it's Colleen Samantha everywhere, and I post all my stories, like, on Instagram mostly,
Gotcha.
But they all funnel over to Facebook. So, yeah.
Okay. I think, people need to know. They need to know what to pray for. They need to get involved. I think it's absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for being here. This is incredible. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, give us a like, subscribe, leave a comment. We'll put Colleen's information in the description below so you can check her out and keep up with what's happening in East Baltimore.